All right, perfect.
I'm here.
Fantastic, everyone. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. So this is the ad hoc committee that was formed in regards to the 3-year mitigation plan. The purpose of this meeting is to do 3 things per the public notice, which is to elect a board chair, or a chair rather, for the ad hoc committee. Additionally, we are going to have further discussions about questions and so forth. Sorry, everyone, I am dog sitting right now, so just ignore that. And so anyway, those are going to be kind of the primary things that we're going to be discussing, as well as some additional questions that we might have for staff will be a part of this discussion. So with that, and this ad hoc committee was formed under board policy 2211 and 2220. Additionally, we give public notice to fulfill our responsibilities to Oregon Public Meeting Law, and we're taking minutes. This meeting is being recorded as well, so that minutes are taken. So with that, we will move on to the first agenda item, which is to elect a ad hoc committee chair.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Jerry.
Yes, I would like to nominate Zach Mulholland for this chairmanship of this ad hoc committee.
Excellent. There's been a nomination. Zach, do you accept the nomination?
I'm willing to.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Any further nominations? Hearing none, will all those in favor of Zach being the chair of the ad hoc committee signify by saying aye?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, Zach, you are now the chair of the ad hoc committee. You will be the main point person of the ad hoc. We have a public notice. I don't know if you have that up in your screen right now, of the 3 agenda topics which we just accomplished one of them, which is electing of chair. But do you have that in front of you just so we can kind of follow along?
I'm trying to pull it up now. Which email would it have been in?
It would have been the public notice. And there's 3 items.
When would that email have come in?
Oh, let's see. That would have came out, I believe, 2 days ago. But let me pull up. And I might be able to find it and then just post it in the chat. Oh, I see one of our wonderful people brought this up. Fantastic. Thank you. So the next is the scope and methodology discussion of timeline, goals, and committee recommendations, and inquiry and clarification, review the 3-year strategic mitigation plan, including clarifying questions to staff administration regarding data and so forth. So do you see that up on the screen there, Zach?
Just a moment.
No worries.
Wasn't planning on running the meeting when I.
Oh, gotcha. My apologies.
Can you post that in the chat so that we just have it handy throughout the meeting?
Perfect. Yes, we can.
Those 2 bullets.
Perfect. Yep. Absolutely.
Excuse me.
All right.
All right. So for the 2 of you, would you prefer to start with item 2 or item 3?
Probably item 2. That's my preference, but Jerry?
I'm okay with that.
Okay. So we're dealing with some relatively short timelines. My understanding is this item is currently on the agenda for next Wednesday as an action item. We could potentially try and adjust that timeline, but my understanding is that the Budget Development Subcommittee is meeting just like a week later.
Yeah, January 19th is when the Budget Subdevelopment Committee meets.
Okay, so I don't know about you guys, but that seems like an important deadline to try and get a decision made by, is that Budget Development Subcommittee meeting. So that's maybe one guidepost. So any thoughts on that just those as decision dates and potential deadlines for us, or do we have potentially more time than just 2 weeks?
Yeah,
than just a week or 4 or 5 days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, obviously obviously the January 7th meeting is happening, and obviously being able to meet one more time prior to that, once we've developed some questions, might be beneficial. And it is up to the board, I guess, to decide whether if they want to move to pass this 3-year mitigation plan or not. So yeah, I feel like kind of like our deadline is that 7th deadline, unfortunately. So that, yeah, but regardless, so I think that if we develop decent questions and so forth now, um, and that there will be at least some time to at least get some answers on some stuff. I know there's some questions that you have pending that have yet to be answered, and hopefully those questions can be answered as well.
Yeah, do we want to just get a Google Doc going with questions to answer? And maybe that'll be the, part C of our discussion here.
Okay.
With regards to scope, can I maybe just get your guys' initial thoughts on scope and what you're hoping for out of this process? I will share that I have some concerns about some of the new investments and the timeline and process for making those decisions on those additional investments. And so I would be interested in putting in some additional details on how and when those things will be decided or, informed, such as, being informed by the deferred maintenance plan that's under development, being informed by the Fund 9. What's the right word? Plan to get Fund 9 back to, not have deficit spending. That some of our decisions should be informed by those things, but then finalized through our budget committee process. So there would, one option would be to sort of take some of those items out and say this is when those things will be decided. But also looking back at the plan from 2019, which involved this is the annual net amount we're going to increase our ending fund balance by. It's a much simpler plan. It leaves those decisions to the normal budgeting process in terms of annual allocations. But it sets that overarching goal of we're going to increase the ending funding balance by this much in year 1, this much year 2, and this much year 3. And so that would be sort of another option, is to simplify it down into that sort of core component and then have a discussions around, are these numbers the right numbers? So that's sort of my initial thoughts. And I would love to hear your guys' thoughts as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Jerry, I've been talking a lot. Do you want to go first?
I'm okay. I'm interested in looking at the variables and assumptions that were used in making the long-range projection, and this includes the COLA. I would like to take a deep dive into that because it is a fundamental kind of universal guidepost that everybody has to pay attention to. And it has significant implications because just a 1 point move in the COLA can impact our long range projection. I think close to $1 million is off the top of my head. It could be less. But to me, it's a fundamental that has policy implications that I think the board could usefully go into that and understand what those variables are. And as you know, there are projections that came out of that budget subcommittee, and there is a credible critique of those numbers. And I'd like to examine both those outputs. And the last time I raised this, there was some, a little bit of disdain shown towards one of the one of the parties, and I'd like to just say that I think we should take these issues on their merits, discuss it on the merits, not who is saying it. And that I'd also like to say that I have nothing but loyalty to this institution. But that doesn't mean we can't openly discuss the questions before us. These are huge implications. And if the college is going through a fundamental restructuring in terms of its educational offerings, I think the board should absolutely be involved. So those are my preliminary thoughts. Thank you very much.
Of course. Overall, with the scope and everything, obviously is to expand the conversation beyond what we've been able to be limited to within those board meetings, and to understand like different things like the trade-off analysis, um, processes, reviewing just basic information about what we're going to be voting on. Overall, just wanting additional information in regards to the 3-year plan. I'm very curious as to because I looked over the 2019 plan, and it looks very different. It's more simplified, and there's parts of me that's wondering if we can go more of a simplified route with the 3-year plan. So those are just some initial thoughts that I have right off the bat. And I think that Jerry, I agree with you 100% correct that this is a big deal. This is a difficult decision. This is a difficult conversation. I think that more conversations, more choices and options, more opportunities to talk about this, I think benefits us more than anything. So anyway, that's kind of what I'm hoping out of this ad hoc committee is that kind of expansion of that conversation, because this is a difficult conversation and a difficult decision that the board has to make. So yeah.
Thanks for that, both of you. It looks like we have Brett on the line, but I don't think Kara is able to join us until Monday. So I think a lot of these questions are going to have to get answered early next week. Obviously, I had submitted a number of questions prior to the last meeting that are supposed to get answered in writing at some point. Hopefully, we'll have those Monday. And so, I definitely think we'll need at least one meeting next week, if not two, to try and get something in front of the board on Wednesday. Ideally, Monday, so that we can get them something for, at least 48 hours in advance, or at least get them some type of notice on what we're working on and what they should expect. And so I think for today, potentially doing just an initial run through through each of those documents. And then if we could just get maybe a Google sheet going, a Google document going where we can start putting all of our questions in addition to the questions that have already been submitted. Is that something that, Austin, can you get a Google doc going to track questions?
That I don't know if I can actually. My apologies, because I'm not an administrator on the Zoom.
Or Brad or someone, is that something that whoever's taking notes can share screen on a questions document? And then I can start pulling up these documents, and we can go from there. So give me 1 minute. I'll start pulling up some documents, and then I can share screen on that. And then we will need a note taker, whether that's you, Austin, or one of the staff that's present. Then we'll get that figured out. So while I start pulling up these documents, if you guys can get that figured out, that'd be appreciated.
Absolutely, yeah. I believe this is being recorded too. And per an email from the president, that notes would be taken by Nicole, I believe. Nicole, can you confirm that?
Hi, yes, I am taking minutes. If you'd like, I do have another document up that's a blank document where I can also kind of help take some notes for you as well, if you'd like.
That'd be a huge help. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And while you're pulling that up, Zach, one suggestion I have potentially is to help with the president and administration to schedule something for Monday and or Tuesday, depending when we could schedule the second meeting, is proposing maybe some potential time periods ahead of time for the president. Because I heavily doubt that they'd be able to give us a response today of time periods. So maybe that would be a best next step, is like a list of potential time periods, which we can discuss that towards the end of the meeting. But
I'm pretty booked solid on Monday. I wonder if Tuesday is something that either or both of you could do. And I'm wide open on Tuesday.
got it. Do you have no time on Monday there, Jerry?
Well, I'll make time if that's. I got a 9 o'clock in Eugene and a couple of them right after that. I could do it late in the mid-afternoon.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I think that we were hoping for, sometime after, sometime after 2 or 3 o'clock or something like that, was kind of my ideal, but I'm going to make myself available whatever time it is. So, yeah.
Okay, I think I've got most of these open. I don't have the 2019 plan right in front of me. So if you want to pull that one up, maybe we can put that one in the chat when the time comes.
Okay.
Okay,
I'll see if I can pull that. I'll see if I can pull that one up.
Thank you. I will start sharing the new plan and we can walk through that. Oh, I need to send a request. Okay, looks like they can let me share. Let me share. Okay. Just let me know when you guys can see my screen.
Okay, got one.
Yep. See it.
Okay, so this is the 3-year mitigation plan as presented at the last board meeting. And so I just kind of want to walk through it and we can just note each area of sort of question or concern. And then we can move on to the other documents as well. So the goal, get us back to a 10% ending fund balance over 3 years. The current projections for each year in terms of increases or decreases and additional new investments and the expected mitigation amounts to fund both of those two things, both the increase to the general fund and the new strategic investments. Okay, our 2025 forecast showing that we're basically looking at a slight deficit for 2027 and effectively no balanced budgets for 28 and 29, but then basically not making progress towards restoring the ending fund balance and actually falling a little bit further behind each year. So the way that this has been set up is it says, well, what is our desired 10% ending fund balance in 3 years? And that's just a hair under $12 million, based, I think, on a $119 million expected budget. And then our current expected ending fund balance with current projections, and then in blue, and then the desired 10% ending fund balance is in orange. So ideally this year we would have a $10 million ending fund balance, and instead we have a 7.5. Next year that goes up to 11 million, but we would only have 6 based on current forecasts, and so on and so forth. So we should be at the orange line and we are projecting the blue line. And for FY26, if you'll recall, we had at the beginning of the year, we had a beginning fund balance of approximately $8.3 million. We passed a balanced budget. We've had a couple things happen. So I think one is that the fiscal audit, I think, reduced our beginning fund balance. And we also are projecting a slight deficit for this year, which results in going from that 8.3 down to this 7.5, from where we were expecting to be at the end of this year based upon the budget we passed last year. Keep going here. So that's just the same information written down. Okay, so then this is each of the strategic investments by year, and just stop me if you guys have questions or comments or things you want to get clarified.
Well, actually, I do have a quick comment because it looks like, and I was writing down some notes from the previous meeting, and I'm actually not sure if this is actually from the previous meeting, the work session, or if this was from the board meeting when this was presented, that we currently have reported $8,020,944 in the ending fund balance. That's what was what was presented. As far as numbers. And I believe you had some questions about this too, Zach, or it might have been Jesse, but that's already puts us at that 8.2%, which is, obviously we need the 10% to reach our required plan goal. And my understanding, and this is a little bit just napkin math here, but that's about $2 million over a 3-year time period that we would need, as opposed to a 3.6 million. Was it 3.6 million in the first year? Might need to scroll up.
We can talk about that. Well, we haven't gotten to it yet, actually.
Okay. Oh, gotcha. Okay, gotcha. Yeah. But anyway, I'm just like, so I guess like an area of like a blind spot for me is that it appears that we actually have $8 million in the ending fund balance. So are we? I mean, it sounds like to me that the necessary amount over the next 3 years is 2 million and not necessarily 8 million or 3.65 million over this next year in cuts. So that's kind of my understanding of the numbers, looking at different budget documents and looking at the presentation given in a previous board meeting. So anyway, that's kind of where I'm at with
sort of three questions there, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So with regards to what the beginning fund balance is, we were expecting the ending fund balance for this year.
Yeah.
To start off, and we'll ask for more clarifications on Monday.
Mm-hmm.
My understanding, we'll go to the assumptions document next.
Okay.
But my understanding is that we thought we started the year with 8.3 million. After the audit, that brought us down to 8 million. We are also now projecting an in-year deficit of approximately 600,000, which brings us down to the 7.45 million expected ending fund balance, which is shown like here. So that's that 7.5 million number that we're expecting as an ending fund balance, is a combination of we had after our audit, we had less beginning fund capital than we thought, and that we're projecting a deficit for this year. And I'm not 100% clear on why we're projecting a deficit for this year compared to our balanced budget that we passed last year. Okay,
Gotcha.
So that's the first part.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I didn't see any clarification in the meetings that I watched. So, because I rewatched the meetings just to get my numbers right. And cool. Thank you so much for that. That might be a question of clarification why there is a deficit.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the second part that I think that I'm remembering that I thought I could respond with is, what is the amount that we need to restore the ending fund balance to, right? And are we trying to restore what the 10% would be for this year, or are we trying to get back to 10%, which will be a higher amount in a future year because it goes up every year, right? Every year we increase our budget by, $3, $4, $5 million. We need to increase our ending fund balance by 1% of that every year. So that's that orange line. So this orange bar is what we're aiming for each year. And they basically set it up as, well, over 3 years, let's get to the blue line, which is that our goal for FY29, right? Is that just under $12 million number for FY29. So that's how this has been set up and framed, is not around, let's hit it in 27 or 28, let's hit it in 29. And this is the trajectory to get there, is getting up to that blue line by FY29. Are we on the same page there? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Got you.
Yeah, so the difference between where we're at and where we want to be in 29 is $4.5 million. We're at 7.5 million and we want to get to 12 million in FY 29. So that's where that $4.5 million in, net increases to the ending fund balance is supposed to come from.
And Mr. Chairman, doesn't that also, that's based on the forecasting model that
Yes,
we
yes.
still haven't, I haven't gotten satisfaction out of that forecasting model yet, so
Yeah, we'll walk through that document next, and then we'll get our questions together, and we'll ask if Kara can join us on Monday and or Tuesday.
thank you.
Okay, so in terms of impact on the general fund, is this bottom line here. So right now they're saying with, with these mitigation amounts, 3 million year one, 5.5 million year two, 8 million year three, and these new strategic investments, that would result in a net increase to our general fund ending fund balance of 0 in 2027, $0, 1.6 million in FY 28, and 3 million in FY 29. So that 1.6 and that 3 is that 4.5 million that we're short currently.
Okay,
Right. So it's actually saying we'll actually, in terms of percentages, we'll actually fall further behind in year one under this plan. Because just to stay even at 7.5% ending fund balance, we would have to put in an extra like $500,000 or so just to stay even at where we're at right now in terms of a percentage. Okay, so moving on. Here's those investments. So FY 27 investments, FY 28, FY 29. So vacancy savings, I've definitely got some questions here around, what is the historical vacancy savings, and, is this something that we need to, have a side fund that we fund once and have it there for when we do overspend? Or is this something that we truly do need $1 million a year, every year in order to fund? Deficit elimination.
Yeah.
Sorry, any questions or thoughts there? Okay.
I like your question.
Deficit eliminations. So this is where approximately 2 years ago, we were told that there was a $5 million hole in Fund 9 that we needed to replenish out of Fund 1. And we said, well, and the proposal was to do that, I believe, over 3 years. And we said, let's slow down a little bit and take 5 years. And we began funding that at $1 million per year. We have gotten a new update since then that says that, in fact, Fund 9 has continued to have large deficits each year on the order of about $1 million a year. And that it means that we've made zero progress in paying down that $5.5 million hole. The $1 million a year we put in has basically just kept us at that same level. And so there's a Fund 9 stabilization plan that's under development. My understanding is that we're supposed to get that presented in the springtime of here's the surpluses and deficits. I asked for that information already, but not just what the surpluses and deficits are, but the plan to stop having deficits. And so I personally am very hesitant to say, let's add an extra $1 million a year to pay down this balance without actually having that stabilization plan in place. There's a statement here that there would be complete payback within 3 years, but given that $1 million a year is just keeping us treading water, I don't see how an extra 1.8 million would pay off that 5.7 million in 3 years. So I personally really think we should get that stabilization plan before we set a particular dollar amount. in out years, that until we actually know how big the problem is and what the plan is to fix the underlying issue, I feel like this is sort of throwing more money at it. Tied to this deficit elimination, I'm going to jump down for a moment. Is this aviation move from Fund 9 to Fund 1? My understanding is that it looks like aviation has some funding in both Fund 1 and Fund 9, and I'd like to get some greater understanding about the revenues and the costs of that program and how to properly balance them between Fund 1 and Fund 9. Not that this is a bad idea. I just want to have a sense of how do we ensure that this is fair for not just for aviation, but for other programs in Fund 9, that they're also being treated in a similar fair fashion, and that they're not getting disparate treatment compared to other classes and programs. And how does that evolve over time? So, if we move 350,000 of aviation to the general fund, is that just the amount we should have there every year, or should that be increasing at a pace commensurate with increases to the aviation program or as a percentage of the aviation program budget? So I think there's just some question marks there about, the balance there and how appropriate is that?
Yeah. Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Yeah, overall, I remember asking this 4 years ago why we had aviation in Fund 9, and I really appreciated Kara showing interest in researching that, because I think because we talked about this, I think, back in July, and we didn't have an answer exactly why it's in Fund 9. And because, in my personal opinion, I feel like it should have been in Fund 1 this entire time. But that being said, it is under Fund 9. So I'm really supportive of this idea. But I do appreciate what you're saying is that, is this transition or transfer going to create any disparity or anything like that? And I also appreciate what you're talking about. Is this going to be a permanent line item in Fund 1? Are we still going to be relying on funds through Fund 9? So I have some questions around that. I'll save that, but I just wanted to make that statement here.
Okay. So just getting through the rest of these, part-time budgets for sections. This is something that I'm kind of surprised that this is needed here, that we're not funding the part-time budgets for sections. So just sort of wanting some additional information and clarification. But, just at a high level, this seems like a reasonable thing to fund, personally. New program development. So I think this is primarily the Lane Forward Fund. So just as some background, Jerry, the Lane Forward Fund was created my first year on the board, so about 2 years ago, and I believe it was $350,000 a year. And this is sort of like an internal grant program where programs and departments can submit their ideas for new programs, and then get allocated funds. So I think it's around 10 projects per year with that $350,000 that get funded. And it looks like that's zeroed out for FY27, but then the president wants to bring it back for 28 and 29.
Okay.
And so that's something where, I don't know if we need to commit to that within this document as a future, budgetary decision. Frankly, that's probably a decision for a future board and a future budget committee to make with regards to whether or not to fund that program in 28, 29. In terms of, what I would be looking for, I have not seen like reports on the outcomes of the Lane Forward Fund. And I think that that's something that would be reasonable for us to request and receive prior to agreeing to extend that program or extend or expand that program, is saying, well, let's get we need an annual update on all of the programs that have received funding. These programs generally receive funding over a 2 or 3 year period, is my understanding. It's not just a 1 year you get this amount. Here's your amount for a 3-year project. And so, we have projects from both year 1 and year 2 up and running right now. And we should have, so we need some data on each project that's been funded and what the outcomes have been. Or, just to know that that project is still in process and that we haven't reached the end of it yet.
Yeah, I'd love to hear some, what benefits, what costs, and we might have some real good surprises there. I'd love to know more about this.
Yeah, one of the things that was going to get funded with that first round was the setup of the year-round enrollment system that allows students to register up to a year in advance, which is one of the reasons I supported the initial allocation. But the fact we haven't really had a good update for the board since then, which isn't to say that, there's not been it might just be that there's been some reporting that we didn't receive. And so I think we all need more information before we commit to that as a board.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on, for fund deferred maintenance and IT capital projects. This is something I just as a personal level, I think we are underfunding deferred maintenance substantially, that we are, leaving future students and boards with the burden to pay deferred maintenance that we should be paying for now. But I think that my concern in terms of process is that the staff are currently working on a deferred maintenance plan. We're supposed to receive that plan in the spring. And so, from my perspective, these numbers should be flowing out of that document, like informed by that document. And then, when we're setting numbers, it's based on that larger context of where we're trying to go with deferred maintenance. So that's sort of my concern there, is that we're just not, we need that plan before we start setting numbers, is the way my brain works. Last, we've got this fund stabilization reserve, which is to say that, once we get back to a 10% ending fund balance and pay down Fund 9 deficits and pay for deferred maintenance, there's also desire to have a reserve fund if and when bad things happen to the college. Or there's less than expected enrollment growth, or something happens where we have less funding than expected. I'm not opposed to a stabilization reserve. I don't know if the ORS that they quote to set up this reserve is the correct one, and that the ORS they quote is around a temporary reserve fund that is supposed to be for a specific reason. And I'll have to find the ORS they reference. It's in another part of the document. But other options might just be around increasing the ending fund balance from 10% to a higher number, or just saying we're going to shoot for a higher reserve within that. I don't know if it needs to be a separate reserve, or there's also sort of a timeline thing of, do we start building this reserve at the same time that we're trying to pay off these other things, or do we pay off these other things first and then route the money that we were spending on that into stabilization reserve and deferred maintenance, things like that. Any questions, comments on what we've talked about thus far?
Nothing on my side.
I'm good.
Okay, so then we get to sort of back into the numbers of this. So right now we have a projected ending fund balance of FY26 of 7.47 million. Using the projections that the staff provided, we're expecting an additional $1.48 million shortfall in FY27 if we don't do anything. And then there's a desire to not only reduce that deficit, but also to fund 1.5 million in strategic investments. And so a $3 million mitigation amount would get us this 1.48 million in reduced deficits and the additional strategic investments listed that we just went through for FY27. And then we do the same for FY29, that there's approximately 2.5 million in structural mitigation, which gets to fund, which funds, 3.18 million in reduce. I'm sorry. So with the cuts in year one, we would go from projecting a 0.18 million surplus to a 3.18 million surplus. And then we spend 4 million on new investments, but then we also have an additional 2.5 million in mitigation amount. And when you add all of that up, it helps us go from I believe is a $7.5 million ending fund balance to that $9 million ending fund balance in your FY28. So instead of having a 7.45 or even a $600,000 ending fund balance after $150,000 loss in year one, we would have we'd have a balanced budget in year one, and we would try and net 1.5 million in year two, and try and net 3 million in year three. That's the crux of what all this says. Any questions or comments on this part? Sorry, I'm sort of.
No, nothing to be sorry about. You're doing a great job, by the way. And yeah.
Thank you for all of it.
Mhm.
Keep
Right.
rolling.
So yeah, point being, each year we have a structural mitigation amount. Some of it carried over from the prior year, and then we have a new investment amount. And when you add it all together, we are increasing our ending fund balance from what it's projected to be to what the new projection would be with the new structural mitigation. And then that takes us from, going from, 7.5 million this year down to 6 million next year, and staying at 6 million versus sticking at 7.5 million in the year one and then growing it by 1.5 million in year two and 3 million in year three to get back to 10%, which is that $12 million number in 2029. Okay. And this is just some sort of rehashing that same information. Okay, and then this is the assumptions, which we can get into in this other document. So to wrap up, there's a lot of new investments that I think deserve additional conversations and discussions, and definitely more that we can learn and ask on Monday. But as a starting point, that's where we are as a starting point.
And very briefly, please tell me if I'm incorrect on this number. Is it 1.8 million that we're putting towards investments? That's
in year one.
Or is it in year one?
So in year one, it's this 950,000
got it.
Vacancy savings. It's 220,000 for part-time budgets for sections. It's 350,000 to move aviation from Fund 9 to Fund 1.
Yeah,
which is reducing that Fund 9 deficit.
Mm-hmm.
So it's it's saying it's an investment, but we're gonna have to pay for it one way or the other. It's just that it's in.
Got it.
But moving it here means that we should reduce our deficit in Fund 9 by 350,000, which last year was about 1.3 million. So that would bring it back down. Doing this would mean that the million we're putting into Fund 9 each year would keep us above water rather than continuing to sink by moving this 350,000 also. So that's and then, so I guess that's it. So yeah, 350 plus 950 is 1.3 plus 220 is 1.52. So that's
thank you.
0.52 in new investments. Okay. Any other questions on this? If not, we'll move over to the assumptions document. Let me know if you guys can see that.
Yes.
Okay. So this is our assumptions for the year. So we've got our FY25 actuals that are audited. We've got our FY25 actuals that are unaudited. So there might still be some changes to those. We've got our FY26 adopted budget and our FY26 forecast. And then obviously, and then we've got forecasts for future out years. So just going through this, we've got our state funding allocation. We've got LCC's expected portion of that, which is modeled at 8.8% this year and 8% in out years. If you look, it looks like they did use the 8% number down here for the 26 forecast. It is that 8% full amount. And then we've got tuition change of 3.1% on an annual basis. We've got revenue factor is our property tax growth rate. So we're projecting 2.3% this year and 3.5% in out years. For reference, our last year it went up by 4.2%. Was the FY23 to FY20 or FY24 to FY25 number was a 4.2% increase. So we're modeling it a little bit low, fairly conservative on that. Total personnel increase, we're modeling 4.7% this year and 6% in out years. And I think those are the main assumptions that go into this. Oh, and then enrollment change, we're projecting a 2% enrollment change year over year. And for reference, I believe that this year the average, we did about 2.5%, but the average statewide this year was 3.5% enrollment growth. So I'm actually a little worried we're going to start falling behind our peers. We might actually start losing state funding if we don't get ahead of the curve instead of behind the curve in terms of how we're comparing with our peers. And that's one question I have for Brett, which he can chime in now, or I can ask over the weekend, is around there's a limitation on how much we can increase our funding each year. And I think we were sort of thinking about that as an individual entity, but not really potentially not taking into account how others might increase or decrease their enrollment. So I just want to make sure that, by only growing 2% this year, are we actually falling behind and, potentially losing our percentage of state funding? Historically, we had a much higher percentage of state funding, closer to like 10% of the total allocation. And that's just that we have lost market share compared to our peers significantly. We had much larger drops from like 2013, 2014 to 2022 than our peers did, like a 60% drop in our student body, or even more potentially. We went from 15,000 FTE to like 6,500 or to 5,800 FTE. So yeah, full 60% drop in our student body in 10 years.
Wow.
And so, we're rebuilding, but like we're rebuilding from the bottom, right? So, we're back up to like 6,600, 6,800 students FTE, but we're much closer to our bottom than we are to our peak. So, I think one thing we should talk about is potentially having a higher aspirational target for enrollment growth over the next few years. I think this last year, the president cut the goal down to 2%, which I think, was, combination of we just had about 16% enrollment growth over 2 years and sort of stabilizing the amount we'd already brought in, but also recognizing that there was a limit on our state funding growth. And we didn't want to get out ahead of state funding where we were, funding, signing students up for classes that we were getting the tuition dollars for, but weren't going to get any state dollars for, and we're going to end up resulting in a net cost for the college if we overextended ourselves. So just getting some clarification to make sure that, do we need to grow faster than our peers just to sort of stay even, or to, get slight increases, or are we growing at the pace that we're ensuring that we're not losing market share compared to our peers and our percentage of the state funding allocation as a result? Awesome.
Chair, I don't know if Brett is able to answer, but I would love to hear if there's an answer. If not, that obviously could be something to wait.
Well, I think it's probably going to be more beneficial if we just add this to the list of questions for everyone. But I think it's important to mention that the high that you're referencing, Zach, was an all-time historic high that was achieved during the Great Recession. It was not a norm by any means for what our historic enrollment count has been. So, you want to be careful of what you're comparing current day to. At the same time, we also have demographic changes. We have fewer students going through the K-12 system. We have pressures from home prices that are causing development in certain cities that where certain parts of the state are growing more than others. So a lot of that goes into the long-term forecast that you get from the college for enrollment looking out. So, but yeah, any of the questions, we'll be happy to put those together, and President Bulger can assign them to staff.
I appreciate that, Brett. Thanks for weighing in with that. Yeah, I think that's a larger conversation we should have as a board and as a college of like, what is a reasonable, should we be trying to stabilize the college at a particular enrollment amount that we think is, reasonable based upon demographics and other things? The spring before I started on the board, the prior board received a presentation stating that we had basically enough faculty and staff to have 8,500 FTE students. And there was a suggestion we could, get back to that 8,500 FTE number without significantly increasing our staffing costs. And we have been increasing our FTE, but our faculty costs have actually been going up pretty steadily basically hand in hand with that. But I think that that's sort of a number that's been in the back of my mind for the last couple of years, is that 8,500 would be a reasonable target to get to. But I don't think we've really discussed it as a board of what is a reasonable goal for enrollment and how long should it actually take us to get there. I think, the president has presented her goals, over the summer for what she expects the growth to be for the fall. But I think it would be reasonable for us to, as a board, to sort of have a longer discussion about, where are we going in terms of enrollment and what is a reasonable pace to expect the president and her staff to get us there. Okay, so specific questions about this document. So I think that there was a couple of, so I think there's the property tax rate for this year. There's the enrollment growth numbers. Were there other numbers from this that you were interested in exploring, Jerry and Austin?
A little bit more about the calculation of the forecasting, and how that calculation came about, because that's kind of a determining factor in a lot of these numbers. But that's one that I think bringing that forward would be helpful.
Which one? I'm not following the
FY25 forecast actuals, which I believe, or actually no, I apologize. It's the 2026 forecast. I apologize, because that's going to determine parts of this year and next year's in this mitigation plan. So understanding those numbers would be beneficial, and how that forecast came about.
And does that include the COLA?
It's not showing on this. Is it showing on this document?
So total personnel increase.
Okay, yeah.
Here they're saying it's gonna be 4.7 for this year is their most recent model. And then they're projecting 6% the out years in 27, 28, 29. Which is, our FY25 actual unaudited was at 6.1%. And so, I think the prior versions of this document had that number at like 7 or 8%. And so it's gotten dialed back a bit. It might still be sort of at the high end, but it is equal to our FY25 actual unaudited. So yeah, I think we can ask Kara to go through this with us, but I think if we, so I have, I have a question about this line of the 7.8%, but it looks like down here they did use the full 8% amount. So I want to make sure we're on track to stay at 8% as a percentage of the state funding allocation. We're not at risk of losing percentage. I think there's this credit enrollment change number that we can talk about. There's this 2.3% increase to the property tax rate that's currently forecast for this year. That seems to be a fairly conservative estimate. I think Kara did say something about hearing that we're expecting lower property tax growth this year than in prior years. But I personally would be surprised if it's this low. I think it'll still grow at that 3.5% rate. Personally, is based on my understanding of Oregon property tax law. But that is the current projection that's used.
Hey, Zach, just to provide some clarification, there's the property tax that's billed, but then there's the property tax that's collected, the revenue collected. And as we enter tougher economic times for folks, we oftentimes see that number decline. And so you do have, you're correct with the percentage of increase, but what's actually paid by taxpayers oftentimes goes down. And so that's some of what's worked into those long-term forecasts. And I'm sure Kara and her team can provide a lot better detail.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Because yeah, if we go from like a 97% collection rate to a 96% collection rate, that could account for that number, that differential there. But I think for and then maybe we could talk about the personnel increases in out years. But so those are sort of the main assumptions that I see being built into this that we could actually ask questions about and talk about. I think most of the others are, seem fairly standard. I think we're projecting a slightly different full-time OPE rate for this year than for out years and things like that. But again, these are things that I think that the staff sort of know what they're doing. We are also projecting a 0% personnel vacancy rate for this year. And so that ties back to that vacancy, funding vacancy savings and not assuming in the budget that that's going to be happening every year. Because right now the budget assumes we're going to save like 1.5 or 1% annually. And the new proposal would have us actually funding that amount each year and not assuming that we're going to have that savings. So that's probably a longer conversation to really know, like, well, what has been the historical savings, and I talked earlier about, like, well, do we need to have a side account that's funded so that when we do not get those savings that we're still safe, or do we really need to fund those every single year at about $1 million a year? So we'll get back to that question, but those are sort of the main ones. Are there other? I guess, look at it over the weekend. And if any other questions come up for you, we can have those ready for Kara on Monday. Just to make sure we're all on the same page about, what the assumptions are and, making sure that those, understanding, first just understanding them and saying, do these seem reasonable? And we can go from there.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, give me 2 seconds, and then Austin, can you pull up the just to write down some notes from what we just talked about, and then Austin, if you could pull up the FY19 document, if you've been able to find that.
Yeah, and I apologize because I was kind of intent on this part of the presentation. I apologize. I was going to look that up.
No, you're all good. I'm going to take a minute to write down the things that we have questions about, and let's loop back in 90 seconds or so when you've got that pulled up.
Gotcha. Yeah. And what I was trying to do was actually link it or put it in the chat here. But why is my computer being weird? Brett, just to clarify, that plan was in what was it, December 19th of 19? Was that the date that was 17th, December 17th of 2019? It was in that meeting, right?
I believe so, Chair. I don't have the information in front of me at the moment.
Okay. Yeah, I remember finding it December 18th. Yeah.
There was a presentation. The board in the fall of 2019 had standing committees.
Yep.
And so there was a detailed presentation given to the Business Affairs Committee, I believe, in October. And then that presentation went forward to the full board in December, I believe.
Got it. Yep. I think I found it actually. So let me get it transferred over here. Okay. R right here, pull it up there. And then I can bring it up here.
I'm going to stop sharing.
And I should mention, just as you're looking, to next week and plans for another meeting and getting some feedback, please keep in mind that most of the budget and finance team have been out this week on vacations for break. And when they return on Monday, it will be the first day of the term. So, please be understanding as to the availability of staff to return answers. They'll probably be prioritizing your board meeting on Wednesday, and then get to everything else as they can.
Brett, do you have any understanding of where the previous questions that were submitted are in process? I think most of the questions we have today were already covered in that.
I mean, I'll have to defer to President Bolger and to Kara to know how far their teams have gotten with everything. But I know most of what was sent in has been sent out to staff to get answers. Anything that President Bolger would have a better idea of what is still possibly out there.
Okay. Let's hope that we will have an initial round of answers when we meet Monday. If we meet Monday, or by the time we meet next, hopefully we'll have some initial responses to that stuff that we can use to inform our discussion.
Right. I put in the chat the link for the 2019 plan. I'm not sure if I'm able to share those.
I'm not seeing that link.
Because it's supposed to go to everybody, not just. There we go. There we go. Hopefully, now do you see it?
Yes.
Perfect. Great. Brett, I accidentally sent you a direct message. My apologies.
That's all right.
Do you want to share your screen or should I?
Let's see if you could. Yeah, because I'm not seeing my capability to share a screen, unfortunately, and I apologize for that.
Okay.
And hopefully that link came through okay.
Yeah, let me know if you guys can see that.
Let me switch over. Yes.
Got it.
Okay. So the board went through a similar process in late 2019 that it had fallen, looks like pretty significantly below its 10% ending fund balance target. And they created a plan to stabilize that. Parallel to this, like we can go back in more detail, but it looks like there was also a proposal to increase the ending fund balance amount from 10% to somewhere between 12 and 15%. That would be sort of a better number that better reflects the needs of the college. That ended up getting shot down, and the previous board went from having a 2-year plan to restore the ending fund balance to they changed that to a 3-year process to restore the ending fund balance. And then this is the plan that they came up with and adopted, which was to restore the ending fund balance over a period of 3 years from the 3.65 million that they were at to 8.15 million. And so I assume that they were successful in hitting that number, and then that we sort of, once they hit that number, we've basically been bouncing around that $8 million number ever since, and have not invested what it takes to maintain that ending fund balance. Because again, the bare minimum goes up every year, and so we actually have to put money into the ending fund balance just to stay at that minimum level. Brett?
Well, just to provide some context, a lot of federal COVID money came to the college once or following the development of this plan, right? So as you kind of look forward as to, how did we end up? A lot of what occurred following this was multiple acts of Congress sending revenue to colleges and to the states. And so I think, when you're trying to compare how things went in 2019, 2020 versus today, that's just something to keep in the back of your minds.
Yeah, thanks for that, Brett. Yeah, I mean, I think we had a lot of those enrollment decreases just sort of, coming off the recession high from the early 2010s. And then, yeah, when COVID hit, we dropped even further. And yeah, if not for those congressional funds, LCC would likely be in a very, very bad situation if that had not, if there hadn't been some additional federal funds to help alleviate the situation. I appreciate that context. So I think part of our discussion is looking at this plan and comparing it to the current plan and sort of, what are the pros and the cons of each plan. This older plan is a much more simplified approach in terms of, setting the overarching targets as compared to the current plan, which is much more detailed, not just in the hopeful increases to the ending fund balance, but also in terms of new investments that are not contained at all in this previous iteration. And so I think part of the conversation is, does it make sense to do tweaks to the more complicated plan, or to try and simplify the more complicated plan into something that looks more like this and is more at, a 30,000 foot level than a 15 or 20,000 foot level?
And I do have some questions in regards to that, because yeah, I do like the simpler model that we saw in the 2019 plan, and I feel like that there was and that's like, yeah, and I don't know, there's parts of me that feels like this is a more manageable kind of concept, but yeah, I think that asking questions around that would be beneficial, at least for this ad hoc group, and obviously it's up to the board what direction we want to go. In regards to this, but yeah, overall though, I do appreciate what you're saying, which is that the more simplified plan seems to be more aligned with the spirit of the policy in regards to this former policy, board policy 245, and now it's 66, board policy 6692 or something like that. But yeah. Jerry, did you have anything to add?
No, I'm fine. I'm tracking right along with you guys. You're doing great.
Okay. So to say, one question, just say, if we were to move towards this more simplified plan, the current numbers would basically be, 0 increase for FY 27, 1.5 million for 28, and 3 million for FY 29. As a very, high level goal for restoring the ending fund balance to that 12 million over 3 years. I'll be honest, I'm actually worried about that year one number. That would take us from having if we have 7.5 million now and we have 7.5 million next year, that means we're actually losing ground as a percentage of the ending fund balance. Does that make sense to folks? I can jump back to the document. It might make more sense there.
Yeah. Actually, please, if you could jump back to the document, that'd be great.
Okay. So give me one moment to find the right spot here. So I think this explains it. So here's our FY 26 ending fund balance is at $7.47 million, is 7.45%. Okay. And then they're saying if we, have a structural mitigation of $3 million, which would mean that instead of losing 1.48 million, instead of going down to 5.99 million, we would maintain that $7.47 million in year 2. Are we on the same page so far? But with this structural mitigation, we would maintain the same dollar amount in the ending fund balance. But in FY26, $7.47 million is 7.45% of the total budget. And in FY27, $7.47 million is only 6.88% of the final budget. Because the total budget went up from year to year.
Yeah.
Right. And so from my perspective, just at a very high level, trying to at least maintain that 7.45% down here in year 2, it would be about an extra $500,000 in year 1 that we would need to save and add to the ending fund balance just in year 1, which means, either we have to cut more, we have to raise more money, have more enrollment growth, or, we need to not fund some other thing if we were to try and do that. And I don't know, there's not a whole lot of new investments that we, that are like obviously not needed in year 1, right? Vacancy savings, part-time budget for sections, aviation fund 9 to fund 1. There's not a lot to cut there, right? And so unless we're going to grow faster, but that's something where, setting a enrollment growth goal of 3% instead of 2% would take care of that extra $500,000 in year 1. Yeah, so that's sort of where my brain is going, is that there would be, we can go through this document and say, well, we're actually gonna make decisions about, the amount of annual deficit reductions here, and we're gonna make that as part of our, Fund 9 stabilization plan decisions, or we're gonna make decisions about these other things, lane forward fund and, how much we're gonna fund deferred maintenance, through some of these other processes, or we can just like really simplify it way down and do something like we did in 19. Do you guys have sort of an initial feeling about where you're wanting to go with things? Or is that something we just need to have more questions and discussion before we can really start thinking about in earnest?
I personally have more questions. So that's my general feeling is I do have more questions because technically what we're doing is we're living in a hypothetical with this forecasting, right? And I don't know all the assumptions put into that hypothetical. Jerry, I think you say it best when you say, you don't necessarily want to live in a world of hypotheticals. You want, the facts, the figures, and so forth. And that's where I am missing is the assumptions made for these hypotheticals. So, So anyway, that's where a lot of my questions lie, because of these hypotheticals and because of these assumptions, that's what is determining the amount that this 3-year plan has to go off of. So that's where I'm at. So thus I have more questions. I lean towards this simpler model that's shown in the 2019 plan, but yeah, I still have some more questions. That's my answer.
And I pretty much mirror the thoughts that Austin just delivered.
Okay. All right. So I've got a few things from that other document. This one right here with all of those assumptions. So I've got, 5 things that I'm gonna send to Kara and Brett and the president, or I guess the yeah, that would probably make sense. Send to the president, maybe CC those 2, so they just have a heads up and don't or have it as soon as possible. And we can send so I have questions about this line, the LCC percentage. This line, the credit enrollment growth percentage of 2%. The revenue factor, which is that property tax percentage growth rate. the total personnel increase, where we're modeling it at 6%, and the personnel vacancy rate. So those are the 5 that I have that we want more information and clarification about. And if there are others in addition to that, I'll CC you both on the email as well. And if you can just add any additional things that you have questions about with regards to the assumptions, that hopefully we can get those in by Monday, and they can try and answer them on Monday prior to us meeting again, ideally.
Let's recognize that this is Friday and people are, coming down off the holiday, got a weekend, and Monday it's going to be tight. But let's try for it.
What's your folks' availability on Monday and Tuesday? I just stated I'm starting classes again for my master's on Monday, and so I'm gonna have some availability both days, but it is limited.
What's your availability, Zach?
I'm gonna stop screen sharing and pull up my calendar. Okay, so I'm available after 2 p.m. on Monday, and I have a break from 2 to 4 on Tuesday, and I'm also available before 12 on Tuesday. So I could do 10 to 12 on Tuesday or after 2 p.m. each day, basically.
How about 2:00 both days?
I think that's what we should plan on is that sounds good to me. 2 or sometime between 2 and 4 both days, either 2 or 3 p.m. But yeah, let's plan for 2 p.m.
Okay. And actually, if we could send an email to the president stating if we're able to meet either on Monday or Tuesday at 2 p.m., depending on the availability and so forth, I think that would probably be the best way to communicate that to the administration to see what options are there. Brett, you went off mute there.
Well, my concern right now is we do have to provide adequate public notice of any meeting, and so we will need to get notice out within 48 hours prior.
So if it went out today, would it be too late for Monday?
If it went out today, it would be okay for Monday. It's just we don't know. A lot of the folks that might be beneficial to include probably won't find out about Monday until they return to work on Monday.
Got it. Then perhaps Tuesday is the best situation in this scenario.
Here's my concern. We are on a ridiculously short timeline.
Yeah.
If we're actually planning on having something ready for discussion by the board on Wednesday, we need to talk on Monday. Like we can't leave this until Tuesday and then try and draft something and send it to them. I would like us to end our Monday meeting with a draft document that we're ready to share with the rest of the board. I can start working on what that could look like over the weekend in terms of like 3 options of some potential tweaks that would be in alignment with what we talked about today. And then setting up a conversation as the board, because even if we move to a more simplified model, I think there's there's more questions about do we accelerate the timeline? Is this the right timeline? Things like that. So I could probably even send out a draft over this weekend to you and to everyone here. And that way we start our Monday discussion a little bit further along. So that once we get our other questions answered, we can loop back to like, well, what are we actually sending to the rest of the board? Because I would like them to get something Monday night, ideally, if we're expecting them to vote on Wednesday, right? And the public needs that notice as well. I get very, very frustrated when I only get things 48 hours in advance, or less. If it comes the same day, I get super frustrated. So, that was my concern a month ago with this, was that 48 hours wasn't enough time for the board to really understand all of the complexities of the document. I would like to provide a minimum of that same 48 hours and, even say like we can come back in a week for a vote if we need a little more time to discuss this stuff. We can schedule another vote another meeting and another vote before the 19th for that budget development subcommittee meeting, which is, I think, our real deadline. Does that sound okay to folks, that we can shoot for Monday and have a Tuesday as a
Yes.
backup? And so we'll just notice, we can just notice both meetings, and if we end up having to cancel the Monday meeting because folks aren't available, so be it. But I'm really hoping we'll have answers to at least a few of the questions by the time we meet on Monday. And it would be good for us to meet, even if the staff aren't available at that particular time, that we'll hopefully have gotten the questions, some preliminary answers at least.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll send out, who do we need to ask to send out those meeting notices for Monday and Tuesday at 2 p.m.?
Probably again through the president. That's how I requested the notice for this initial meeting. So yeah, it would probably be an email to the president.
Okay. And then it would probably be reasonable for us to send an update on what we talked about today to the full board. Does that sound right? Or is that crossing lines in terms of deliberating towards an outcome with the full board?
Well, per the president's email, the minutes to this will be posted to board docs. Let me find the exact email. As a report to the board. So that would be the vessel to do that. But Brett might have some more info.
No, I was just going to remind everyone that there can't really be a collaborative document that you all work on outside of public meeting.
Yeah.
So just gonna keep that in mind, that you don't want to create serial communications through a Google Doc.
Correct.
If I were to draft something, am I allowed to send that to the people on this ad hoc committee prior to the next meeting?
Yes. I would just make it very clear as you send it out. And go through President Bulger so that she is helping with providing support for this. But then the request can just be made that there's no response to it, that it's informational for everyone to come prepared for the next meeting.
Great. So I should email President Bulger, CC Austin and Jerry, and say, this is getting ready for discussion on Monday. Please don't respond. This is for you to have available so we can work on it on Monday.
Yep, that's the way to do it.
Okay. Okay. Friends and ad hoc members. Okay, so just to debrief for a moment, I'm going to send the. Do we have a document with all of our questions? So I've got the questions about the FY26 forecasting. And then I think, were there other questions that we needed answered around, expected cuts, other, planned investments? I guess I had some questions about the planned investments, so I will try and maybe make sure that I get all those. I can send the draft questions to share with this group to see if there's additional questions, right? So I can, if I email the president and CC Austin, Jerry, they can add additional questions if I missed anything.
That's correct. Now, keep in mind, the public records law issue is around serial communications that lead to an action. If you are sharing a list of questions, that's different. That's gathering information for the board for future conversation, discussion, usage. But you just keep things separate, and in the back of your minds, make sure that you're not facilitating a conversation.
So I will email the president after this meeting with a request to notice the meetings for Monday and Tuesday at 2 p.m. I will later today send a list of draft questions as well, based upon what we discussed today. And if either of you have additional questions, you can add those questions to the list for Monday. And as far as I'm aware, that's really all we're doing is putting in that request for the 2 meetings and sending the questions as soon as I can put those together later today, and that you and Jerry, Austin and Jerry, can each add to those if I missed anything.
I think that's
Good
it.
job. Good job, Zach. And
Okay. Thank you everyone for participating. I look forward to some additional good discussions leading to positive outcomes and a process and document that the community can process in a good way.
Absolutely. Brett, Nicole, Randy, thank you. Greatly appreciate this, especially after New Year's, and Happy New Year, of course.
Thank you all.
thank you. Mhm.
Good day, everyone.